What's up, booktube? It's Leah Cooper, and I haven't made a video in a while. So this is the first video I've made in approximately 2 months. I think my last video was probably my October wrap-up. This is going to be my November-December reading wrap-up. Quick housekeeping note, this is the first video I've made since the changes to YouTube's fucking terms and services. So that being said, and probably going forward, I need to work on a new kind of opener, because my disclaimer here is that this channel, as of right now, and probably for the foreseeable future, is not monetized by me. I'm very, very upset by the YouTube changes to their terms of service. I think it's wrong that they first took my ability to monetize my content away from me for being too small, and saying that people didn't want to, like, companies didn't want to run ads on channels with such small reach, and then having the gall to put their fucking ads on my channel that is quote unquote too small. That's bullshit. So I just a fair warning, there's probably going to be an increase in foul language in my videos, because I don't want them to be monetized by YouTube. I don't want YouTube making money off of my videos. Feel free to run ad blocker whenever you watch my channel, please. If you happen to see an ad on my channel that's really offensive, let me know. I don't know if there's anything I can do about it, because again, it's not my AdSense. And that's another reason why I'm really fucking irritated by this change to their terms of service. But if you see something really offensive, like a Trump ad or a Republican ad or something like that, do drop me a comment so I can report it. Like, I don't know, but I would rather know that kind of thing if it happens than not know, even if there's not a lot I can do. Okay, so that's the basic housekeeping. I think I've written a disclaimer going forward in all my description boxes, basically saying the same thing. I don't want to dwell on it too long, but man, I'm mad, and I won't lie, that is a big reason why I have not made any content in the last 2 months, because I've been wrestling with what I want to do. I temporarily actually privated all my videos while I was trying to decide what to do, because the reality is I am a small channel. I don't really grow, and I don't ever see myself reaching the arbitrary thresholds that they've put on my ability to put my own fucking AdSense on my videos. So like I'm probably never going to be monetized for myself. And so the idea of YouTube making money off my content, fuck them. Okay, so that being said, the other reason I really haven't made any content is because I was really busy with school. I went back to school this fall. It was kind of, end of the quarter, lots of projects. I was really busy with that. Also, I just wasn't reading a whole lot. But I have read some things. So let's talk about the things that I've read in the last 2 months. Some of them are for school. Some of them have been for my own personal edification. I will go ahead and start with the things I read for school, and I'll try to go through those really quickly. I'll leave a timestamp right here if you want to skip ahead to where I talk about books that I read for my own enjoyment or for reviews or whatever. The first thing I finished in the month of November for class was an excerpt from the Handbook of Creative Writing as Experimental Practice, and this was a section written by Talia Fields. Honestly, it's been 2 entire months since I read this, and I vaguely remember it. It's really just kind of a navel-gazing little 7-page thing on what does experimental fiction mean. The next thing I read for class was another excerpt, and this was actually from a book that I already owned. So we read the first 31 pages of A Beautiful Marsupial Afternoon by C.A. Conrad. But so this is something I owned because, ironically, about 8 years ago in another creative writing class at this college, C.A. Conrad came and spoke to my class because they were promoting this book and it was a new release. And then a few years later I did purchase it. So this is their one of their somatic practices. Basically, it is a bunch of different somatic creative exercises. That's the black pages. They outline the practice and doing it. Somatic practices are kind of like a meditation, and then in a reflection, maybe you make yourself uncomfortable, you do something out of your norm for a period of time, you do some metacognitive reflection, and then you do some creative work out of that experience. And so then the following pages are usually a single poem, which is what Conrad wrote in response to developing the somatic exercise. So I find this book very interesting. It's definitely not going to be everyone's taste. It's very, I mean, like, I would call this pretty modern poetry, and the somatic exercises are very strange. A lot of them involve the kind of confluence of self-reflection and kind of the grime of bodily living on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, so we read some of that because one of the exercises in class was to craft our idea of a somatic practice. So, and I'm actually going to be using this book and that concept as part of my winter quarter creative writing project. So the next thing I read for class was a book, and that was The Activist by Renee Gladman. This is a piece of early 2000s experimental literature, post 9/11, and that's definitely a key element to it. And it's a meditation and exploration of activism, of what being an activist means and looks like in this post 9/11 kind of world, in this Bush era. It's very interesting. It's written in a few different formats, in stream of consciousness kind of conversations, in these snippets like this. Kind of hard to see. I know my white balance is really high today. These are little snippets of like news articles. There's definitely this idea of misleading or fake news being perpetuated by the government. Again, this came out in 2003, Bush era. This is really interesting. I think if experimental fiction, political activist fiction sounds interesting to you, you should definitely check it out. I don't really rate things I read for class, just an FYI. I think I may have given this like a 4 stars because like I genuinely quite liked it on like just a personal reading level. Like maybe if I had heard about it or seen it in someone else's booktube video, it is kind of the thing I would have picked up. I think a good companion to this would be Citizen, An American Lyric, for instance. Then the next thing I read was another excerpt, and that was Alarms and Excursions by Rosemary Waldrop. This is a really old, I actually don't know what this is published in. I think it's kind of like another collaborative creative writing handbook with lots of different contributors. But I've actually read this before as well. And probably if I looked through some of my past school papers, I would actually find a handout from when I originally read it. Actually, it was in another class. It was by the same professor who was teaching the class that Conrad spoke at, but it was a different program. It was a different quarter. So Alarms and Excursions is kind of like an experimental essay format that Waldrop is sort of proposing. So you'd have like a thesis with maybe like a quote that you want to consider, and you'd have excursions where you exposit on that quote. You think, you mull, you contemplate things, and you might have an alarm where you bring up doubts about the quote. You might introduce other quotes, and you kind of go back and forth in an experimental essay format. It's very interesting. I think if it's one of those things that's like really pretty standard praxis in my university. I don't know how common it is to run across in like more traditional four-year institutions rhetoric classes, but it's like I said, I've now encountered it in 2 different classes, almost a decade apart. So it's really interesting. I mean, you can probably find it online too. if I can find a copy of it online, I'll actually leave a link to it down below. Just, you know, check it out if you're like at all interested in like academic writing. It's very interesting. The next thing I read, I need some coffee. This is only my second cup of coffee. The next thing I read for class was a short story, and that was Bartleby the Scrivener by Herman Melville. We read this in class for a unit on writing parody, and the parody writing portion was actually really fun. It was a group project, and there was like 6 different groups, and each group had about 5 pages of the short story to work with that we were supposed to write parody, and then we all performed it in one long continuous thing. And so everyone's parodies were obviously disjointed from one another, but it was a super fun experience. It was so cool to see how the different groups had decided to approach parody. My group decided to turn the lawyer into a witch and Bartleby into a apprentice, and it was pretty damn funny. We got a lot of laughs. So, and we wrote it round robin style, which was really cool. So that was really fun. The short story itself was boring in my opinion, not to my taste, not something I would read for fun. I think it's pretty typical of Melville's style. I frankly think it's very typical of the style that was in vogue in the time it was written. Let me see, what was the publication date? 1853. That is not an era of literature that I find particularly interesting. I find it very dry. It's not just a Melville thing. It's, you know, I'm not like a Dickens fan either. So I just wasn't into it. I think the backstory on Bartleby is more interesting than anything else. Melville, there was an announcement in a newspaper that included the first chapter of an upcoming book being written by one of Melville's contemporaries about a lawyer, and he decided to use that as the basis of satirizing the kind of pompousness of that book, or how that book sounded from its first chapter. I think that is a very funny story, and probably contextually this story is pretty funny, but it just doesn't resonate with me culturally. So there you go. The next thing I read for class was another short story, and this was The Garden of Working Paths by Jorge Luis Borges? I think I'm something like that. Excuse my terrible pronunciation. Borges is obviously a very famous, let me get this right. Argentine. He was an Argentinian short story writer. He's one of the kind of, I think, eminent authors of like magical realism, maybe like a pioneer of magical realism, kind of one of those guys. And he's been on definitely my kind of vague big TBR of a classic author, like a modern classic author I'd like to read. This is the first thing I'd ever read from him, and this was interesting. This short story is about a British Japanese professor who is actually a Nazi sympathizer, World War II, and his supervisor, who's also a Nazi sympathizer, is killed, and so he realizes he now has to get this message out about a planned British attack, and he goes up, he goes north, and he finds this guy, and they talk about this book that his ancestor had written about, that was found in a library, and it's about multiverse, multi-universes. It's about time. It's about decisions. It's about how every decision we make changes reality and creates new realities, that kind of thing. It's interesting. It's very interesting. I would definitely probably read more from him, I think. The short story comes out of a short story collection. I think that might be quite interesting to read. And that looks like everything I read for school. So, kind of a weird mix of like short stories and essays in this month. Overall, I would say I had a pretty positive reading experience. I thought the stuff that my professor shows was like really interesting. It sounds really, I think, disjointed, but then collectively you start to see a lot of parallels between the work, which is fascinating considering they're so diverse, the picks. So anyways, that's everything I read for class. Let's transition into what I read for fun. The first thing I finished, and I finished this on November 3rd. I was trying so hard to get this done by the end of October, but I didn't quite finish it. And that was Practical Magic by Alice Hoffman. I finally read it. It feels like a lifetime ago since I read this. Like, Halloween feels like 20 years ago. It's been a really it was a busy fucking November, early December. But I did finally read this. I was reading it at the end of October for Halloween. This is one of my books of my 20 books to read in 2020 TBR, which is one of my reading challenges this year. I really liked this. I think I gave it 4 stars. I can probably check, but I don't care. First time reading Alice Hoffman. I'd be curious to read the other books around this one. There's like at least 2. I want to say there's 2. Maybe there's only 1. There's at least 1 prequel, and I think it's about the ants. Definitely different than the movie, but it's different from the movie in ways I wasn't expecting. And I think the biggest thing is like, this feels so much more dated than the movie. Like, the movie did come out in the 90s, right? Wasn't it like 98? Yeah, the film came out in 98, but the book was written in 95. That's actually really close. Like, that film got produced pretty quickly. There's something about this, though, and actually it probably has something to do with however long it took Alice Hoffman to write this. This feels so much more dated than the movie, and that was really strange to me. And like, I think it's good, but I will say I think the thing is that this book tackles somewhat different issues than the film. Sally's children are teenagers in this book, and that is like part of themes and conflicts, which I did find interesting. The focus of this book, I feel like, is much less on Sally than in the movie. So Sandra Bullock is really the focus of the movie. And while Sally is, yes, a principal character in this, I think she fades into the background a lot in the book because Jillian gets a lot more of her own standalone page time and development. Like, she actually has a romance in the book, which is not in the film at all. And also Sally's children, because they are teenagers and going through their own issues, they each have a lot more independent development in the book. And so I feel like the book is, I think, just more of an ensemble story, whereas the film is way more focused just on Sally. Would I read this again? Maybe. I could definitely see myself reading it again in kind of like the fall, because I do think it is just kind of a charming, maybe kind of almost comforting read. So yeah, I liked it quite a lot. The next thing I read and finished was another book off my 20 to read in 2020 TBR, and that was The Death of Mrs Westaway. And again, I picked this because it's like a mystery thriller, and I just thought it would be really good to read in the winter, fall, rainy, dreary, and it was. That being said, I gave this 2 stars. This was really easy to read, and actually, so like, like the beginning was very ho-hum, but then I want to say like the middle half, I actually did get like really into this, where I was like turning the pages, staying up kind of late. I remember one night reading quite late because I wanted to advance the story, I wanted to find out more. The problem is really in the second half, and the biggest problem is it was probably gonna chug along easily 3.5, 3.75, maybe even 4 stars until the reveal. The reveal was garbage. Like, I guessed the reveal like this much into the book, and then the author tries to distract us from the fact that it's so obvious and tries to basically throw us off and say, oh no, that can't be right, it's something else. But then it turns out, oh no, I was right. But the whole reasoning, like the whole like mechanics behind like what the reveal is, like the underlying motives, that's the word I'm looking for. The motives of like the villain are so bullshit and so stupid And the entire last bit, the entire like climactic bit is so stupid. And no. Also, I'm torn on whether or not I like the protagonist in this. I don't think I like her. I think that's where I landed. She's just kind of insufferable. Like I think the idea of a millennial in poverty is definitely like something that rings true, but fundamentally I didn't love how the character was written. But the biggest problem was just the villain. So stupid. So yeah, this was a massive disappointment. I was really hoping to love this. This was I got this in a book box that my sister bought me last year for my birthday. I was really hoping I'd like this so that I could give it to her to read. And I am not going to, because it's literally not worth wasting her time over. So yeah. I'm trying not to like spoil anyone, because like obviously it's a mystery thriller. If you say too much, it just spoils everything. I guess I'll tell you, this book is about a young millennial. Her mother has died. She's got like a loan shark on her doorstep. A letter arrives from her telling her grandmother has died, and she's in the will, and she needs to come to the like sort things out with the lawyers. And it's like, well, but her grandparents died like 20 years ago, so that can't be her grandmother, but the name's right. And so she decides to go and pretend to be the woman's granddaughter so that she can hopefully inherit a couple £1,000 so that she can get the loan sharks off her back. But then she gets embroiled in like family drama. And it's so fucking obvious, and it's also just so fucking stupid, and it didn't need to be. That's the thing. I think there's some bones of like a really great mystery here, and just badly executed. So yeah, that's my opinion of that. And that's the other thing. This was the Ruth Ware I was most interested in, because I know she's written a bunch of other stories, like The Woman in Cabin 10 and stuff, but I'm not really interested in those. And so the fact that I had like a really bad experience with this one means I probably won't pick up any of her other books. And then the next thing I finished was an audiobook, and that was Beguilement by Lois McMaster Bujold. This is the first book in another one of her fantasy series. This, as far as I can tell, is not explicitly set in the realm of the five gods. There is some, this is like the Forsaken Gods kind of universe, which I sort of feel like maybe the world that this exists in could be like 1,000 years after the realm of the five gods and the gods have left. Kind of like, again, I've always thought the realm of the five gods was very reminiscent of Guild Wars 2's Tyrian gods kind of setup. And so like I could definitely kind of see this as like a or situation, just without elder dragons. But I mean, that is not confirmed on the text. So basically we'll just call it a standalone fantasy world, where there are basically farmers and lake walkers. And the lake walkers kind of have a magical affinity called ground, which is basically just, it's kind of actually like the force more than anything else. It's like life force. It's the accumulation of life over time, and they can kind of manipulate it to do different things, like sense where people are, sense kind of general emotions. They can link grounds to like help repair and heal one another. And what they do is what they're tasked to do. They kind of live in these nomadic communities, and they patrol around farmer country and outside of farmer country. And basically what they're tasked to do is to identify these things called malices that from time to time are basically birthed out of the earth, and they mind slave farmers and animals, and they actually change animals into like people. They using by like sucking the life out of like the people and the animals and the ground around them, and they create armies, and they molt and become more powerful and enslave stuff and kill things. And so the lake walkers are tasked with destroying malices, and they've got this whole thing with like the only way to kill a malice is to teach a malice how to die, because malices don't understand mortality upon their emergence. And so lake walkers craft these special knives out of their own bones. They craft the knives out of their own bones, and then they imbue the bones with one of their own deaths so that they can use it to kill Malice. And it's so interesting. Like, the world is so cool. And this story is about a young girl who is a farmer girl who's gotten herself pregnant and has run away from home. And she's on her way to the big city. Unfortunately, a Malice has popped up in the region, and she gets captured by the Malices. They call them mudmen. And the mudmen are animals that have been, like, reshaped into, like, people henchmen. And she eventually meets up with a lake walker, and it's their story. And I love this series so much. It's so good. I love Lois McMaster-Bujold's characters. She writes very, like, heroic, upstanding characters, and I just love them. They're so lovable. I love the world she creates. Like I said, I think the magic system and all, like, is so cool in this world, and it just makes it fun to read. Well, listen to. I listened to this on audiobook. I think the audiobook's really well done. So yeah, I think I gave this 5 stars. I loved it. It's definitely a lot more. It has a lot more romance and kind of sex in it than the Penrick books or the Curse of Chalion. Like, way more romance focused, relationship focused. So I think if you want kind of like, if you want something that's like, it's not technically a fantasy romance, but it is a fantasy with a lot of romance. So if you want something that's kind of like bridging fantasy and romantic fantasy, those two genres, I think this would be a good one. Then just in general, if you like fantasy and you like romance, or you don't mind a romance in your fantasy, I think it's pretty good. But fair warning, there is a lot of romance. So if you hate romance in your fantasy, steer clear of the series. Because like all 3 of the books that I've read, or sorry, all 2 of the books I've read in the series so far have a lot of romance in them. So then after that, I did immediately pick up book 2 in the series. That's called Legacy, and I just finished that about a week ago. Again, on audio, same narrator, really great. This book kind of deals with the politics of the lake walkers. So the characters have gone back to one of the lake walker encampments, and they're dealing with the sort of social interpolitical issues of the lake walkers and another Malice fight. And it develops the magic a lot more, the ground stuff, and one of the characters' connections with his ground. So again, really good. I think I gave it 4 stars. The Legacy didn't go quite in the angsty direction I was hoping it would go, but it was still really good. Then I also read in the month of December a ebook. I read this because okay, so all this time I've been reading Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. So I pulled this out of like my TBR jar in October, and since October I have been reading it. You can see I'm almost 200 pages through this book. So I'm almost 20% through, but I've been reading it really slowly. Obviously, it's been 3 months. I'm 200 pages. It's just a long ass book, and to be honest, I'm just reading it this slowly so that I don't get into a reading slump or burn out on it. Because I when I'm laying in bed in the evening and I'm tired and I want to just read something, this is not what I reach for. So I'm reading it slowly until the point at which it grabs me and I can't put it down. I have not reached that point yet. I could really easily put it down, hence why I have been doing that. So slowly reading this, but I needed to read something else that I could actually just read for extended periods of time. So I tried reading an ebook I got on my Kindle ages ago. That was The Soldier Scoundrel by Kat Sebastian. This is an historical romance. I didn't love this. I think I gave it 2 stars, and it really solidified it for me that while I do like a romance in my books, I don't really love reading romance as a genre. The format, the structure, of a romance, like a genre romance book. And when I say genre romance, I just mean the big overarching category of romance, not like a category romance or something like that. But big overarching genre of romance, I just don't like. I don't like the romance actually being like the one and only plot, to the exclusion of everything else. I don't love characters basically falling in love within the first 2 chapters, which I feel like is very common, because again, like the whole premise, the whole thing is that everything revolves around them being in love. I just don't love it. I don't like it. And this book really solidified it for me. I think if you are into historical romance, you would have no problem with this book. There's a like kind of a mystery plot in this book that I found very interesting initially, but it was completely forgotten for most of the book. Very little happened with it, and the reveal was cheap, because again, the authors didn't give it any time or develop it like at all, and that's a genre thing. So yeah, you know, I think as a reader, like, a taste change. I think I was like more willing to read romance and kind of put up with the romantic plots a few years ago. They're not to my taste now. I think that has become more and more true over the last couple of years, and that's just personal preference. And sometimes you have to read a book, not really get along with it, to kind of realize that's your personal preference. It's not a terrible book though. It's about a scoundrel, right? A guy who kind of like grew up on the streets of London, and he hates rich people, but he will let rich women hire him to like solve their problems. Like, yeah, basically. But then this guy who's like a brother of one of the women he did a job for comes knocking on his door, because like he's like, why the hell did my sister pay you money? And then the protagonist recognizes the guy as like this wealthy earl's son or something, who he once saw, you know, getting sucked off in a hedge maze by another man, and yeah, instantly falls in love with him. I mean, he doesn't instantly fall in love with him, but it's all like instant attraction. Whatever. Not for me. And again, like there's like this whole mystery plot of like this blackmail and stolen letters and stuff that the author doesn't develop, and I was kind of bummed out about that. But yeah, I do have 2 more Cat Sebastian books. I don't know if I'll ever get around to them. So yeah, I read that. But then I read a book I really liked, and that was Harrow the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. This is the second book in the Locked Tomb series. So I fucking love Gideon the Ninth. I read it this summer. I thought it wasn't gonna, I read it, I mean, like, eventually read it because of the hype, because it was nominated for BookTube BFF Awards. I was kind of rolling my eyes at all the hype. But oh my god, I fucking loved it. So I've been really excited to read Harrow. I got it from my library as soon as I could, and could not fucking put it down. It's over 500 pages, and I was like staying up to read it every single fucking night. It was so good. I was so addicted. It went places I was not expecting. It was I didn't really know what to expect based off the ending to Gideon, but I definitely had an idea for where it was going to go, and it did not go there. But it was really, really interesting. My one big gripe, I think I gave it a 4.5 stars instead of a 5. It was a 5-star right until the epilogue. So there's 2 scenes that happen right before the epilogue, which I think would have made a stronger ending. The epilogue is obviously intended, it's to be, ooh, what's that mean? And like keep you guessing for the next one. But it's so tonally dissonant from the rest of the book that it feels cheap. Like, it feels like a cheap ploy to make you go, ooh, what's going to happen in the next book? And no one needed that, because, like, there were so many questions raised in the 2 scenes preceding the epilogue. And the 2 scenes preceding the epilogue tonally, thematically matched the rest of the book so well that I think it's a shame it didn't just end on a fade to black on Harrow. That very last scene, I really, really wish it had. But it didn't. So I knocked a 0.5 star off of it, because I feel like disjointed because of that epilogue choice. But the whole rest of the book is fantastic. It's basically just Harrow learning to be a lictor and dealing with the aftermath of what happened at the end of Gideon the Ninth. I don't want to say anything else. I don't even know if I can say, if you liked Gideon, you'll like this. I don't really know. If you like Tamsin Muir's writing, you'll like this. But I think that's very hit or miss. I fucking love her writing. I fucking think she's funny. And so, like, again, if you didn't find Gideon the Ninth funny, you probably won't enjoy this a whole lot. I thought it was really fucking funny. I love her kind of irreverent style. I love her abrasive characters. I love the mix of what the fuck is happening. I like it's shifting between kind of points in reality and also points in time, and I loved that. I loved the mystery. I thought the reveal of what was going on was interesting, was clever. It did feel like a payoff. So yeah, I'm trepidatious about book 3 based on the epilogue, because that was so lame in my opinion compared to the rest of the book, but I'll remain hopeful, even though I think we're going to end up having to wait like 2 years for Alecto. And then I did try to read one more book. I mean, obviously I'm currently reading a book, but I'm not going to get it done before the end of the month, I don't think. But so I attempted to, prior to that, I was reading another book. It was one of my 20 books to read in 2020 TBR books, and that was Burned by Magic by Jasmine Walt. This is a self-published paranormal fantasy, but it is secondary world paranormal fantasy shifter story. I got this years ago for free, and I always wanted to read it more out of professional curiosity than anything else, because I do write in the paranormal genre, or I have in the past, and Jasmine Walt managed to launch this book. Like I said, self-published. She launched this book and made gangbuster money, like insane money off of it. And I was always kind of curious if it was a good book. So, yeah, I put it on my 20 to read in 2020 TBR. I tried to read it. How far did I get? 170 pages. And it was like 230 pages. I think I got like 60% in, but I was having to force myself to read it. And I finally just went, you know, this is putting me in a reading slump because I'm not interested in this. It's not good. So the thing about this book is it's literally checking every single trope box, but the writing, which is fine. So like you can write a book that marks a lot of tropes, but I think the thing is, to make a book like good, you can't just mark all the trope boxes. You need to bring something to the story. So that has to be either like really great characters that your reader becomes invested in, or you have to have really great writing that like it's just a pleasure to read. Like you have to do something more than just mark all the like you can just mark all the trope boxes and you can not have like an original idea in the whole thing if you bring some other enticing element to the work. But this book doesn't do that. It just checks all the boxes. The writing is serviceable but not good, and the characters are there to service the plot and are to that degree are wishy-washy. That's my term for them, where they kind of flip back and forth in their motivation because they need to be able to do whatever the plot needs them to do. So they're not actually characters, and on top of that, they're just kind of unlikable, like extremely unlikable, but not in like an interesting way. They're just kind of unlikable in a poorly written way. So I DNF'd this. And that's like such a lame note to end. Well, that wasn't like the last thing I read. I read Legacy after I DNF'd this book. I just talked about it earlier in this. So like Legacy is actually the book I'm ending the year on, which is great because I loved it. It had lovable characters. It had really interesting world building. Yeah, that's what I read. I think for stats, I'll try to do this quickly because my camera battery has been blinking at me for a while and this video has gotten very long, I realize. I read 1,252 pages in November, and in December I read 1,416 pages, so these were 2 very low months. I have done slightly better in December, mostly because I didn't have any class reading to do in December, but I would say there was definitely kind of like this transitionary slump between November and December where I just kind of read a couple of things that I didn't love, and that definitely slowed me down, but whatever. I'll talk more about my stats in my... I'm going to do a video where I talk about my goals for the year and whether or not I met my goals, and also making goals for next year. So I'll talk more about stats in that video, which I don't know. Hopefully I'll do that. I'll film that within the next week. But yeah, let me know if you've read any of these books down below, if you're thinking about picking them up. If you have any questions about them, feel free to ask them down below. Sorry this video is so long. Final kind of coda to all this is, like I said, I am still going to be in school for winter and spring quarters. So to be honest, I think my reading is going to be sparse for the next 6 months, and I don't know how often I'll be making videos, but at the very least, I'm going to try to keep doing monthly wrap-ups. I think that's the best that I can promise. And we'll see how it goes. So thank you all for watching. I hope your holiday, whatever you did, whether or not you celebrated, if you just had a week off or no week off or whatever, I hope it's going okay, pretty stress-free. I hope you're healthy, happy, safe, and I miss you all because I know I haven't really talked to any of you in a while. If you want, just like give me a wave down in the comments so I know you're here, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Oh, I will also be doing a top 5 bottom 5 videos hopefully this week too, so look out for those. See you guys later. Bye.